Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sparked AU Core Technical Design Group. We're still going through a lot of our normative content and changes for AU Core R2 in preparation for ballot and testing. But I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country, and that we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we all gather today. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first educators, scientists and healers. So here's our schedule. We're coming still into this normative this is our window that is best for this. And then we've got another call before we go through and hold the Spark testing event where we're looking to go through and test the changes that we've been putting into AU Core R2 around healthcare service, around related person, around medication statement, and also the changes we've made to the existing profiles. Before we then come back, assess the maturity levels, start going through and focusing on our informative and editorial kind of JIRAs, and really get into preparation for ballot, run through our QA, publish, and off we go into ballot. So that's where we're going through now. So here's our agenda for today. So we'll go through our usual business, approval of minutes, updates and news, and there's quite a bit of that. We're also going to talk through some of the work that's being done in AU Base, the work that's already happened and the work that is in progress now, because that work will come into AU Core. Some of it won't affect us. Some of it actually does potentially change what is available in AU Core. So we need to understand those impacts and also see if anyone wants to participate in some of the work that's being undertaken there. There's some exciting new work around extensions, I think. Then we've got some AU Core JIRAs. What was in the agenda today is the first one around relaxing patient.gender. That has been requested to be withdrawn. So that is no longer on the agenda for today, and we won't be progressing that one. We do still have on the agenda AllergyIntolerance.note. So we're looking at that, and that's a revisit of a previous decision. And there's also on the agenda an editorial change. There was an action on me, I think almost a month ago, to look at how we were referring to AUCDI, because the text and the title that was in AU Core wasn't actually aligned with AUCDI, and we were waiting on some of the updates in the AUCDI space around their titling and telling us their preference, which I got yesterday. So I've come back to you today. It's good timing to put forward what we can do. And then we'll talk about what's next in terms of next meetings and AU Core JIRAs. Before I move on, is there anything else that people would like to add to today's agenda? All right, I'm not hearing anything. So let's go through our usual business. First up is approval of minutes. These were sent round. This is from our last meeting. I'll just go there now. A little bit bigger. Okay. So just scrolling down, we have all our attendees, we have our slides, of course, and recording, and we've got the set of minutes and the decisions that were taken. Does anyone need any more time to review these minutes before we look to approve them? Hearing none, would someone be happy to motion approval of these minutes?
Make a motion, Ricardo.
Thanks, Ricardo. Who's happy to second?
I'll second. Steve Swinsberg.
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions or comments while I find the electronic poll? Okay, I've just launched that. You should see in front of you a poll to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. If you can't see that in front of you but have access to the chat, please put your vote in the chat, +1 affirmative. And if you've dialed in, you can say your name and whether you are affirmative, negative, or abstain. Okay, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll with the votes in the chat. That is 17 affirmative, 0 negative, 11 abstain. The motion carries. Those minutes are approved. Okay. So that was the approval of minutes. Action. There's been an action. There were no new actions in the last meeting, but there was one in the previous meeting that came out of our discussion around whether or not we're linking AU-based encounter and healthcare service together. And that action was to raise this at the firework group and the use of the associated healthcare service extension. The update for that is this is on the agenda for the firework group call that is the 18th of June. So if you're interested in this one, come along to that meeting on the 18th of June for the firework group. That's in our fire calendar. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, if you're logged in Confluence, the HL7 Confluence, you will find we have calendars, and some of them are visible on this page, which lists all the different calls and the different connection details. So you can drop into any of these meetings when they're being run. Okay, back where we were. Okay, other updates and news. So the normative changes from our last meeting have already been applied to the AU Core CI build. So that's progressing and that's being prioritized to make sure we have all the changes that we're looking at that are normative in the Spark testing event. And we also have an update on some of our deferred jurors from the last ballot that were requesting changes, I think, to licensing and policy. Brett, are you on the line and able to provide an update around that?
I am. Cool. Yeah, the licensing policy items, there are a number of related tickets, but we've covered half of the material in a working party. So the working party for the board has met, and we discussed things. We came to a conclusion on some of the HL7 Australia controlled content, but there's also some references to NCTS content, so we have to go back to the agency on that. So Ruben, I think, was following up with the agency to get finalizations on those. It's mainly just which words to use exactly for the licensing descriptions, and that is still outstanding. So we're chasing that up to get that done. So once that is completed, we'll know. There'll be a report back from the board saying this is the approach we would like the work groups to take.
Okay, thanks, Brett. There's also another point here. This is, and I've not provided the Zula link. I think there's a call out for people who are interested in tackling a bit of that, and we might put that in the chat. Yeah. So did you want to speak to this one, Brett?
Yeah, only there are some tickets raised from the last ballot around if this is really implementation guide, sort of quality and processes questions. So it was about having a good set of documented conventions on the methodology applied to some of the metadata, and there's a few other things too there with managing various value sets and things like that. So yeah, the idea was to form a working group to kind of work through that and come to a position that can be presented back to the fire work group. So yeah, if you do have any interest in that topic, yeah, please do get in contact, because we'll try and form that group and start working through things. And that will come back as a conventions policy documentation about how we expect they'll go back through the firework group, and become a way to approach doing that content in IGs going forward. So yep. So yes, if you do have any interest, let me know. I will be trying to get together at least the people that raised the issue and some of the IG facilitators into that discussion anyway. But if you do have an interest, I would really like anyone interested to come along.
Thanks, Brett. Are there any questions around that? And if you do have any, you can post them in Zulip or get in contact with Brett. Next one, an update that I thought was relevant. So part of what we're doing when we do core and we have these discussions around what's in US core and what's in IPA and what's in IPS, and of course they're looking back at us. And I got a notification from them fairly recently to say, hey, we really like what you've been doing in AU Core, and they're looking to include very similar content. So I just thought I would show what that is. Different colors, but this should be very familiar for those of you who've had to go through the guidance page quite frequently around this kind of context of standards, and then looking at relationship, and also then looking at comparison with different implementation guides. They're still building this in at the moment, but they're essentially looking to trial out, along with us, a couple of pages we've been doing in core that are, as is a bit more complex, this kind of diagram and that table. And we've also got the comparison section, I'll just go to, which is the one that they are also including on that one page. Ours looks across at both at IPA, IPS, and US Core in and of itself. And there's some discussion between the editors of the national kind of cores that this would probably be a really good thing for HL7 International to eventually maintain a kind of like a core comparison across different national cores. So I thought that was really interesting, and that I just show that to the group. Are there any other updates or news that I'm missing? All right. If not, let's move on to our next topic. The next topic is about the changes that are happening in AU base, and which ones are servicing in core and which ones aren't, and what work is kind of underway. So it's a busy slide. I wanted to provide the update that the JIRA discussed and approved at the last meeting to remove the section on communication preferences guidance from AU Core and move it to AU Base, because it wasn't specific to AU Core. That got discussed at the last firework group meeting, and they have agreed to move that. So that work is underway with a set of PRs to essentially add in that section into the general guidance of AU Base, and then to update AU Core to remove that section and to change the references on our profiles for AU Core patient to point to the AU Base section. For the rest of the changes, I have split those into changes that are impacting an AU core mandatory or must support element, and then the other ones, including other resources we don't yet profile in core. And this impacts us, of course, because we inherit from AU base. So AU core is essentially a set of constraints on top of base to satisfy the minimum requirements. So I've got the 4 there that are the ones that are changes that impact, in this case, must support elements. The first one is that in our AU core pathology result profile and diagnostic imaging, actually that doesn't, we took that out of AU core, but we used to have a diagnostic imaging result profile. There's been a constraint removed on effective X, which constrained the allowed data type choices, and that is now unconstrained. So all the observation different types for effective X are allowed. So date, time, instant, timing, and so forth. We're going to skim through a lot of these. If there's any that you want to ask a question about or see or go into more detail, just pop your hand up and we can pause there. The next one is on medication ingredient codable concept. So we would see that surface in AU core medication. There's a value set that is the AMT medicinal product and substances value set. That's been authored and published in AU base, but because it is a purely SNOMED, purely AMT set of concepts, there has been an agreement now to move that into NCTS. So it is the same terminology on the wire, but moving it into NCTS will mean that there'll be a change to the value sets canonical, and it'll now be published and maintained through our National Clinical Terminology Service. And that's already been agreed. There is a proposed change to suggest in manifestation. So we would see that in AU core allergy intolerance, where we inherit the binding from AU base. At the moment, that's a very broad binding, and there is a suggestion on this one to actually use the defined Australian reference set for manifestation, which is more specific and more appropriate. And that is going to be discussed at I think the next AU Fire Work Group. Matt, I think you just joined us. Are you available next Wednesday to come to the AU Fire Work Group meeting?
Yes. I'll put that in my calendar, make sure I come to that one. So next Wednesday.
Yep, next Wednesday is when this one is being discussed, and see whether that is appropriate. And when that change is made in AU base, that is what would be, that's what we would inherit in AU core. Still as preferred, so it doesn't go to extensible or required. Brett.
Yeah, I think similar is the new ticket you've got for encounter reason code.
Oh yes, I raised that this morning.
Yeah, which I dropped in the chat. Yeah. Yeah, so that's another one that would come in as a must support. It's relevant. It would only be probably preferred in AU base, but you might consider strengthening that, maybe. That's up to AU Core TDG to decide.
Please put in the chat, is there JIRA tickets? There's JIRA tickets for all of these. I just didn't have time this morning to go find them all. They're in the change log of AU base. So the one for observation X, if I go to change log here, is the JIRA. I'll just pop that in a reply, Heath. So coming back, yes, thank you, Brett, for putting that in. So in AU core encounter, while we have must support on reason, which is the clinical indication in AUCDI, there wasn't any profiling work done in either base or core to bind to the Australian reference set for reason for encounter. That reason for encounter is published as a suggested appropriate terminology in AUCDI for that element. And so we've raised the ticket that the localized Australian binding, the preferred one for supplying that element, should be the Australian reference set published by NCTS. So that is the encounter reason code, which will also be discussed at the next fire work group meeting, which is next Wednesday. Last one in terms of things that we would see surface, but in this case would have no normative impact, you would just see it, would be that there's a new patient identifier profile being worked through for e-requesting. So if we were to go to AU Core Patient, what you see here is beyond the fact that we have specific identifier types called out. There are other kinds of identifiers where there are a set of profiles that help guide how you create them that are defined in Australia. We don't define support for those in core, but they are possible. And so there's work being done now in AU base around an internal patient identifier, and we would see that just pop up in this list here, but it wouldn't have a normative change to AU core. And Michael Osborne, if you're on the line, did you just want to give a brief rundown of what is this new identifier profile and why is it being done?
Yeah, sure, Danielle. Can I grab the screen?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing.
Thanks. Yeah, hi everyone. So this work came down from e-requesting, and it's to do with how we send results back in pathology. So practice management software
Sorry,
has a
Michael.
patient identity. Oh, can you not
Can you
hear
make
me?
your screen? Can you zoom in a bit? That's
Oh, yeah,
quite
sure.
small.
Yep, no worries. So practice management software and the like has a patient identifier, which they like to get back with their results. Now, it's not a managed identifier like an MRN or it's like a UR number. So there's no enterprise patient index or master index or anything like that, managing it with updates and merges and stuff like that. So it's we wanted something that was different to identify that it's not a strong identifier. It's just like a client identifier between an application and say like a pathology system or something like that. So we just put some usage notes around it. It's not any different to any of the other identifier profiles apart from the fact it's got PI as the code for the type. All of the constraints are the same. So there's some work going on right now. There's discussion. I've just put a link to that Zilla chat. And there's a branch, there's a feature branch that you can have a look at there. If you've got any feedback, either email me or put it on that Zilla chat. And yeah, any questions?
All right. Thanks, Mike.
No worries.
Sorry, Michael, I might just quickly jump in there. So I find my mute.
Okay, go for it, David.
Yeah, no, this is good. This is good. I guess with the use of identifiers, and you're calling it an internal identifier. So I guess, does that mean internal to the organization that's using that identifier? So it comes from one of their systems. Do they need to know what system that identifier came from?
Yeah, so David, I think there was a lot of discussion around what's meant by an internal identifier and what a system means and what an application means. And that's why we've tried to put a lot of that knowledge into the profile notes. But essentially, it could be a cloud system, or it could be a tenant of a cloud system. It could be any of those architectures that assign this identifier.
Yeah. And so when,
But
sorry, so
yeah.
so when you're using that identifier, is the process using it, are they just using it because they wouldn't be able to pass it to anyone, right? It would be only relevant to the way they're using it.
So rather than answering all these questions here, I think you're a good test case, David, to read this document and come back to us with questions, because we've attempted to actually describe this in the documentation, and if you come back with more questions and after reading it, then we need to revisit this, because as I said, I'm using you as a test case.
Fair enough.
Because we've
okay.
actually attempted to answer those questions specifically, and more specifically how it compares to the medical record number identifier as well. So yeah, one, saving time in this meeting, but also I think we don't want to bias you in your review of this.
No, I will have a look. Thanks.
You're the perfect person to review it.
Here's David.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's come back to then the next item. And part of those questions that you're having, David, is why we're running through this, not just for what would impact core, which is very little, but what else is going on out there to make sure people are aware of it and can be involved in it if it's relevant to them.
Danielle, you might need to reshare your screen. Sorry.
That's all right. I will reshare now. How about that? Can you see my screen?
Yep. Thank you.
Alrighty. Okay, so that is essentially the list of work that either has been done or is being discussed at our next firework group meeting that would in any way do something to a mandatory or must support element. But there's also other work that's going on. This first one, there's a vaccine serial number extension that was included in AU-based immunisation. And that is, well, I mean, it's to support vaccine vial serial numbers. That's been around for a while, and it's just been included in AU-based immunisation. So if you look at the snapshot of AU core immunisation, you would see it like you would see all sorts of other AU-based extensions, but that doesn't make it a must support or a mandatory element for core. Similarly, there was also an agreement that for AU-based healthcare, which has a communication element, to update the binding from that element from the FIRE value set to the Australian Enhanced value set. It's the same value set that we also see in patient communication languages. And the enhancement there is that it includes a list of common Australian languages, those that you can get an interpreter for, and also includes the First Nations languages. So that, again, you would see that in the snapshot because it's from the AU base, but it won't actually change a conformance requirement in AU core. There's work being undertaken also in medication strength, and this one is quite interesting, and I think it's worth, Marika, if you wanted to describe what is being done around medication strength.
Thanks, Danielle. I've just popped the JIRA in the chat for anyone who wants to look at that, and that links through to the ZULIP. This came about as part of seeing if we could move the medication strength extension that already exists in AU base from a draft to FMM1. And as part of that, we kind of identified that there was a gap. So the current medication strength extension is designed to surface as free text the strength of the medication as a whole. And the gap that was identified was the ability to surface as free text the strength of individual ingredients within a medication. So we took it to Zulip, to the community, and originally we're proposing expanding the original extension, but there were some really good suggestions. So I know that some of you are online. Thank you for your input into that. And where we've kind of landed in terms of the plan of action and where everyone seems happy is updating the guidance on the original extension, which I'll speak to in a second, and pre-adopting the R5 medication ingredient strength codable concept. So what that would give us the ability to do is to just pre-adopt that element. And because it's a codable concept, you can surface free text from that to surface individual ingredient strengths. What needs to happen as part of that is, and where this is at the moment, is we need to just draft some guidance to cross-reference between those pages and say, in situations where you want to provide information as free text about the strength of a medication as a whole, use this. If you want to provide information about individual ingredient strengths, use that. That's about where that's at. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
I have a question. Do we have many systems that actually use this information, or is it more wanting to ensure that systems that might use this information have a place to put it?
So it looks like for the actual pre-existing extension that is already in base that we were looking at moving to FMM1, I think in the response in Zulip, we had several people identified that they had already implemented it or planning to implement it. So at the medication level, yes. I know that within best practice, you also have the option for the ingredient level. I can't speak beyond that. So I haven't polled whether or not at the individual ingredient level what the wider industry usage is. But there seemed to be interest, and people were generally in support of pre-adopting. No one opposed pre-adopting that concept. Does that answer your question, Richard?
It does, thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering to what extent this was solving a theoretical problem as opposed to an existing problem. Best practice is big enough that this is solving an existing problem.
Awesome.
All right, thanks, Marika. And again, for those of you who are interested, I'm pretty sure this is on the agenda for the next fire work group. Is that right, Marika? We're presenting that there for voting?
Yes, it was. I think it was discussed. I just need to obviously put together the guidance with Ruben back and forward. So it'll depend on where Ruben and I get to async between now and then.
Okay.
But that's the plan. If not this fire working group, definitely the next.
Right, thanks, Marika. Okay, next one. There's a proposal that there should be in practitioner qualification, which again is not a must support element in AU Core, but in qualifications, there isn't any terminology or available standard way to describe your Australian College Fellowship. So there is a proposal for work to be done to make that available for those people who would like to use that. So that's being looked at. The next one, we have an Australian time zone extension that's been used on things like practitioner and healthcare service, so that when you say that they're your healthcare service availability or practitioner availability, it's used practitioner role availability. It's used the Australian time zone extension, but from a request from HL7 International, who said you should be using the international one and have just profiled that, we're going to try to progress that work in this version of AU Base R6 to deprecate the Australian time zone extension and instead profile the international one. Next one, AU Base used to have an AU Base diagnostic request. With the work being undertaken by AU requesting, we have instead put in place an AU Base service request profile, deprecated the AU Base diagnostic request in AU Base because it's been recognised that that work around diagnostic requesting is now moved and under the remit of the AUE requesting project, and they're going to be defining what is involved there. Sort of similarly related to AUE requesting, there's work that's being done on an AU-based coverage profile to provide an initial profile for publication in the current release of AU-base. Next one, a little bit around conventions. AU-base used to use, I guess, Australian spelling instead of fire spelling, the way that we do in core or patient summary and requesting. So that fix has been, I think, a long time coming, where we get rid of the white spaces and make it actually related to the fire, match the fire resource type. So that's non-normative. That's titles. Next one is about SPCU, and SPCU has been proposed and brought into e-requesting, and there's also a proposal to describe how this can relate across Australia and have that included. Is Ruben on the line? No. Okay. So yeah, there's a general proposal. It will not require changes in AU Core to describe how SPCU can be used and how it would work within an Australian context. And last one is looking at MBS code system URL allocation. We have for the PBS code system a nice canonical URL in addition to the OIDs that have been used in the past, and for MBS there's being work that's being undertaken in conjunction with like the agency to see if we can also clarify what the URL for the MBS code system should be. So that's essentially the set of work that's being undertaken. For those of you who are part of the firework group, have I missed anything?
Yep. I just dropped one in the chat, which was
Okay, what did I miss?
No, just the guidance. We resolved to move the language preferences guidance.
That's the top bullet point.
Oh, I'll shut up. Goodbye.
No, it's okay. I didn't have
That's
the
right.
JIRA though.
Yeah, that's fine. We don't have a JIRA yet. Well, so yeah, that's the AU Core JIRA, but there will be one coming for the AU base change, and then you'll have something to consider.
Okay.
To change what you've got in AU Core.
Thanks, Brett. So this work is being undertaken through the firework group, and some of this is being driven by us in Core, some of it's being driven through AUCDI, some of it's being driven through e-requesting, some of it's being driven by community needs for implementation around things like medication strength. And we will keep you up to date, and note that this goes to ballot at the same time as Core, because Core depends on a particular version of base. So for AU Core R2, we will be depending on AU Base R6. And to a certain extent, a lot of this content will be tested in the Sparked testing event. We have a question from Heath.
Just quickly on the diagnostic request scenario, you've used the word deprecated whilst you've indicated that it's been replaced. So
yes.
Does that mean that diagnostic has been removed, seeing that
No.
it's been replaced? Okay. So there's a new service request?
Yes.
Okay.
You can indicate something is deprecated by,
yep.
And you can also say it is replaced by. So where you have deprecated a concept, including a code or a profile or some other structure, you can say, we've deprecated this thing and is replaced by this other thing.
Okay, so it's just been renamed, or is there an additional profile?
It is a different profile. AU base contains both.
And the
One is
existing
deprecated, one is
and
not.
one's indicated as being deprecated. Okay,
Yes,
cool. Thank you.
that's right. Yeah, no worries. You can see them both in the profile list under service request here. Which question here? Yeah.
Would it be worth us changing the description there so that to say it is actually deprecated in that description so that it displays in this list?
I could say it replaces the deprecated. It is actually deprecated. That is the official term.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, just if one is like putting deprecated in the actual description on the header there, just so that it also displays in this list as deprecated. I know it's off topic, but
no, we can't do that. That's not how you do it. Although we can request the script that auto generates this page to update to show deprecated in brackets or something after this.
Yeah. Okay.
We can look into that. But there's formal structures that you need to use to indicate deprecated that are used throughout FHIR that make all the tooling work. So we're doing the same thing that the FHIR standard and HL7 infrastructure work group and HL7 terminology infrastructure work group recommend as best practice.
Understand.
That being said, I totally agree that is just confusing.
Yeah, if we can get a tooling change, that would be great. But I mean, all I was suggesting was, the non-normative, non-wire description was changed. But if
well,
we
it
can
isn't
get
for
the
core.
publishing,
We don't have this in core, so it's not. It doesn't impact core. It impacts e-requesting, and they've made the change. But it doesn't impact core because we do not include service request as part of our set of supported resources yet. Okay. Fred and I will probably have a look at whether or not we can make a change in Dushy around getting the tooling to indicate deprecated in the list of profiles and extensions. I think that would be very helpful. Any other questions around this list? All right, let's move on to the JIRAs. So we've got this one, which is both normative and a revisit. So before we go into it, I'm just going to cover, for people who haven't been at a meeting where we've revisited something before, what that means. And there is a specific process we have to use when we need to consider change requests where we've already made a decision. It's called a revisit. Our first step is, do we revisit? We need to consider the previous decision and look for what's different. And then we have to vote on that. Do we revisit? If we choose to revisit, we then discuss and vote. Sometimes that lands us in the same outcome. Sometimes we change the outcome. So just here's our formal requirement here. It's part of our governance and operational requirements on HL7AU decision making, which is also inherited from HL7 International. And part of why this is in place is so that we don't keep coming back to the same decisions again and again and again, noting that there are often changed circumstances or new information comes to light or additional use cases that mean you do actually want to relook at something. And so there is instead of our usual majority being just a 51%, we actually have to go to 66% majority affirmative vote to reopen, or I guess revisit, an item. So that's what we're looking at here. So coming back to this one, can I check who's on the line who'll be speaking to this item and discussing why we should be revisiting it? Is that you, David, or Stephen?
I can do it, and David, you can chip in if you want.
Yeah, Stephen was the main person, but he's off at another workshop at the moment. But yeah, Go for it, Ricardo.
Let me know if you want me to click on anything or if you would like to share your screen.
Look, I'll probably just let me just pull this up on my screen. Okay. So I'll just take over sharing this. That's okay, Daniel.
Okay, you should have the rights to do that now.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully you can see the screen.
Yes.
So this request was raised by David, but it was actually done on behalf of Stephen. But Stephen couldn't be here today because he's in a workshop session this morning. So Stephen's raised this one to request that we revisit a change and eventually potentially just revert a change that was made previously, which is to add a must support obligation flag to AllergyIntolerance.note. So in the past, this obligation was removed because this was not part of AUCDI, as I understand it, but this has now changed, and AUCDI is now including this in this upcoming release, I believe release 2, which is kind of captured here, and the comment for which one of the aliases is note. And I guess based on that, we were, which is just this one here. So based on that, we were just kind of interested in revisiting this one and proposing that the must support obligation flag is reintroduced. But as you said, so this is really kind of reversing a decision that has been made previously. But yeah, we felt that this was something that would make sense to do, and we would like to put that forward for discussion and support by the community.
So I'll clarify the AUCDI element, adverse reaction risk summary comment, which is what is mapped to AllergyIntolerance.note. That's in AUCDI R1. It was published in AUCDI R1, noting
Okay.
I think at the time that the discussion was held, it wasn't yet in
It wasn't there yet.
AUCDI R1. Okay.
Yeah, okay. So it made its way into then the final version of R1. Okay, cool.
Yes.
So yeah, so I think one of the things that Stephen pointed out here is that something similar was done for AUCDI.note, and he was kind of, I think, raising this more for consistency at this stage than anything else, given that yeah, we have that now in AUCDI. So I think that's really it. So there's no probably other reason behind it apart from kind of the consistency element.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments on whether we should be revisiting this now?
Well, I think if we did this originally based upon AUCDI, a draft version of AUCDI, and then AUCDI version 1 settled on something slightly different, then I think it is worth us reconsidering it just upon the fact that AUCDI's final state for version 1 is a little different, and we have the opportunity to take account of that before we produce the next version of Core.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's enough reason to revisit it, apart from anything else.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Any other comments or questions?
That was also my most recent viewpoint too. Given that I was the suggester originally of it being removed, which, yeah, I'm more than happy for this to be revisited.
All right. And Brett?
Oh, yeah, just to add, you could probably consider allergy intolerance as kind of a specialization of condition anyway. So in some ways, keeping it aligned would include note as well.
All right. If there are no, I guess, no questions on a different topic or no comments with a different opinion, I might ask for someone to make the motion to revisit that decision.
I could. Do you want to do it, Richard?
So would you like to, I guess, revisit and then say, like, putting must support on AllergyIntolerance.note, I believe it is.
Yep. I propose that we reopen the decision to exclude must support from this element.
All right. So we've got a motion to revisit. Who would like to second that?
I'm happy to second.
Okay. I'm now going to launch the poll for the current motion, and we will ask people to vote affirmative, negative, or abstain on whether we revisit the decision on must support for AllergyIntolerance.note in AU Core Allergy Intolerance. Okay, and of course, for those who can't vote, pop that in the chat or say your name and what your vote is, affirmative, negative, or abstain. Right, now I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll. I will share the results. With what is in the chat, we have 23 affirmative, 0 negative, 10 abstain. The revisit motion of needing at least 66% is carried. We are over that. I think it's about 70-something%. And we will now entertain the discussion around why it should be must support. Is that still you, Ricardo?
Yep.
Can we just jump to a motion? Do we need to discuss it further?
Yes, we
That's
do.
good. Look, I was probably going to
Because
ask
the
now.
only motion was about now it's in AUCDI. Being in AUCDI does not mean application of must supports. AUCDI is a clinical best practice specification that includes minimum requirements and also a bunch of future thinking elements that we consider in this group as to how do we support it and ensure that our profiles allow the exchange of AUCDI elements as well as the application of obligations that do minimum system behaviour. They're not equivalent. So we do need to discuss.
Yeah, a possibility is if this turns out to be particularly onerous for people to implement, we may decide it's too early to make it a must support obligation at this stage if it's extremely onerous to implement. I have no reason to believe that's the case, but that would be a reason for us not to include it.
Yeah, I think on top of that, I'll probably just read from the JIRA ticket that Stephen has raised when he says that it's very common for additional information to be captured as notes, also in this context of allergy intolerance. And from that perspective, I think that's just another probably factor that gives it a bit of strength to be added as a must support type element. So, look, I think beyond that and the consistency matter, which we've already kind of mentioned previously, there's probably not much more I think we can add.
All right, Brett?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if I could do a quick survey and see any system people that have note capability in their systems today.
All right. Can people put their hand up if your system implements allergy intolerance information and you support note or comment? We only had one person put their hand up. No? How many?
Can I just have a moment to check?
Yes, no worries.
And yeah, my pathology system doesn't, but our EMR does.
Okay.
So what would you like me to do?
Put your hand up. Why not? You can represent that one. You know, you're adjacent.
There you go, Marika. Landon says yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I think that looking at the spread of different systems, I think that is, and who they are, indicating a relatively wide implementation support. So that's one of the requirements for putting must support. Thank you, everyone. You can put your hand down. I have another question. Is it a minimum requirement? Is it for every use case, no matter what? We think that if a system has note, it should be there, and we should be handling it. Are there any objections to the view that note is a minimum requirement for systems?
Not handling it, no erroring.
Yeah, and populating. Like for every use case, we want to send it along. If you've got it, add it.
Known. Yep.
Yeah.
Populate if known.
Yes.
If you have it. So if you don't have it, you don't have to provide it. If you have it, you have to provide it.
So 0 to 1?
0
yes,
to 1.
we're not talking about changing the cardinality. I think what we're clarifying is that the obligations on systems that come in by applying must support do apply for this element, that we always want it to be populated across all the use cases if a system has it, and that we always want receivers of that data to not error when receiving it.
So 0 to many, we are saying.
What is the cardinality? I haven't checked.
Yeah,
it's whatever that is. That's not
Yeah,
under
0 to
topic,
many.
guys. We have a JIRA that is about must support. It's not about cardinality.
So I'll put a link there back to our original vendor support page that we had on this, and we actually included note in that. And it was 4 out of 5 systems that supported it.
So if we're not hearing any alternative suggestions or comments on why the inclusion of that information and that obligation isn't relevant for their use case, and they would prefer that not to be on the wire, then I think we've discussed the sufficient of the principles for inclusion in AU Core. And I think unless there are other questions or comments, we could move to a motion. All right, who would like to motion? If that's you, Richard, we can't hear you.
Richard, you're on mute now if you're talking.
Danny, while Richard's organising what he needs to do, I am happy to do that.
Okay.
So let's
progress. Hang on. So the motion, if we look at that JIRA, and I should share my screen again. Actually, I shouldn't have stopped.
Thank you. That makes it easier. That's why.
Yeah. So the actual one is this one. So the motion, and I'll create the disposition now, is, I believe, we're saying that this is persuasive to add must support and AU Core obligations to AllergyIntolerance.note. Is that right? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got Michael who was motioning, and who seconded? Heath.
Heath.
Was that you that seconded?
Heath,
okay.
yeah.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions or friendly amendments on that before we move to the vote? I will now relaunch that poll. Okay, we're now seeing the vote to apply must support and AU Core obligations to AllergyIntolerance.note. Okay, quite a few people left to vote. See that in the chat. All right, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll. With the votes in the chat, we have 18 affirmative, 0 negative, 12 abstain. The motion carries. We will be making that change in AU Core R2. All right. Wonderful. Okay, next one. So I think we've got half an hour left in this meeting. Is that right? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So on one of our previous meetings, we had realized that in AU Core, we had this strange way of talking about AUCDI. We've been calling it AU Core Data for Interoperability in the menu and in a couple of other places, and that is not its name. It is Australian Core Data for Interoperability. Part of that was because it's just way too hard to fit really long words on a menu. And also we'd realized that there's a proposal for a name change, and there was an action on me to go away and discuss with the editors of AUCDI how it should be referred to, and to let me know when the proposal for title had been decided. So, and I think they've done a presentation to us in the TDG and obviously also the clinical design group around the proposal to go from the Australian Core to clinical data for interoperability, which I understand has been ratified. Now, the proposal and what they've said is we should be referring to AUCDI in almost all circumstances by the phrase AUCDI, not the actual long phrase. That is the term they want it to be understood and used by, similar to how HTML is just how we talk about things now. So they would like for the menu to actually say AUCDI, similar to how you see it in US Core. Do I have one of those tabs open? Yeah, I do. So, for example, US CDI, because that's the way that everybody knows it, and that is the request from the AUCDI folks, that we have in our menu AUCDI, and that we refer to it in text as much as possible as AUCDI. Now, page, and that the proposal is basically do that and then spell it out, whatever its current title is, on the actual AUCDI page. So that's the idea on what we can update in AU Core to make clear how we're referencing and then be in line with the request in the clinical space on referring to this document, which I think is what I put here. So menu goes to preferred term, which is AUCDI, and then on that page we use the fully specified name, and then our other references in text use the preferred term AUCDI. So that's the proposal. How do people feel about that? Comments, questions? Are you happy with that? Any concerns? We should just go away because it's just menus and we should just get on with it? All right, if there's no comments or questions, can I get someone to motion this change? I can't because I'm chairing unless I swap over chairing.
Sure.
I'm happy to motion that we change the link to be AUCDI as opposed to AU and the actual longer spelling that we've been using.
Okay. And you're happy for us to have the one instance on the page that is the fully specified name?
I am, yes.
All right. And who's happy to second that?
Yeah, I am Dave McKillop.
Thanks, David. Any other comments or questions while I find that poll again? All right, let me relaunch it. Okay. Please vote affirmative if you're happy with that change to go ahead. Negative if you think, no, I have a better idea and I'd like to say what that should be. Or abstain if you don't feel like you can contribute to the decision.
Sorry, Danielle, I just missed who motioned that one.
That was Marvin.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll and share the results. So with the vote in the chat, that goes to 20 affirmative, 0 negative, and 8 abstain. The motion carries. We'll go ahead and make that change. Awesome. So they're the main change requests we had already lined up. I want to, before I talk about the next thing, just go to our next agenda first, because there are some that are coming on the next agenda. So the potential list of JIRAs that I've had conversations with people about for our next meeting is this set. The first one is looking at, I know it says revisit, that's probably not quite right. We have on our AU Core backlog a deferred set of issues that were around adding must support and obligations to date time. This has been raised by a couple of different people. So where there's a parent choice, and Heath, did you want to speak before I finish? Or do you want to walk through this? You're on mute, Heath.
You keep going. I'll come in after.
So for a number of our clinical resources like procedure, allergy intolerance condition, there's been some JIRAs raised to suggest that we should actually be applying must support onto the date time choice. And we deferred this. At the time, we didn't have a clear suggestion on what would be desirable or appropriate, and it hadn't really been addressed through other specifications. But there is a suggestion that we actually can now have a concrete proposal that would make sense, and we can bring that to the next meeting. And that's these JIRAs here. Heath?
Yeah, there's one more, 45216, which is around immunisation.
Yep, there's...
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that before. Sorry, thank you.
That's okay.
And 187. Yep, cool, thank you.
No worries. So that is on the agenda for our next meeting. There's also a request on updating guidance on more specific blood pressure concepts that's come out from the 715 project, the smart forms, and looking at adding additional guidance in. There's also, this doesn't have a JIRA yet, but an editorial one from the IG authors that we need to be referencing the AU-based guidance on SNOMED CTAU in AU Core, because it got added in AU base, but we haven't updated our specification to point to the fact that it exists now. And we also have in our backlog that the making sex at birth must support, which didn't get across the line in R1. There was no support for it besides the person who motioned it. But we did make a comment when we made that decision that we should look at this again in R2. So as we are coming to the end of R2, we do need to go back and reconfirm our position, whether that means we do decide to make it must support or whether we decide to defer it. We need to address that. So that's the proposed agenda for next meeting. Does anyone else have a JIRA or a change request or a topic that they want to add to this? Oops, I forgot. AU Core R2 testing scenarios and priorities. In advance of the Spark testing event, we'll go through what we want to test and why. So sorry, coming back to my previous question. Would anyone like to, at this stage, add a topic or a change request to this list? If you do, you can email me or post it in Zulip or message me in some way. So how long do we have left? All right, for 15 minutes. So one of the things I want to double check now with people, as we're coming to the end of this, if we are going through the number of meetings we have left and the work we want to do in R2, on the AU Core backlog, and we do have a backlog, I can just put that in the chat, that keeps up to date a list of, what's deferred, what's open, what's on the future of AU Core page. Some of these things are many releases ahead. Some of them are things we could look at now. I think we should be going through our open backlog and making decisions around deferring or addressing these items as we go. I'll note some of this, like this one, I think was discussed at our last meeting and the decision was to leave it open. So that's also a position we can take as we look through our backlog. But the other question I wanted to pose before we start going through our backlog in each of the meetings is, out of what we flagged as priority right back in December, is there any interest to start working on these things? Many of which, I'll note, we couldn't finish in R2, but we can start working on them now for R3. Is there anything that people have as a priority that they know won't be in R2, but would be really helpful for them to get to, for us to start discussing and developing drafts and materials for? Heath.
I'd like to see document reference considered. I don't know if there's any other interest, but for me, there's enough use cases for document reference around the place that we should be considering exchanging documents.
I think that's what I'm seeing in patient summary as well, that I think they'll end up being a set of exchange options talked about in AU patient summary R1.
Yeah, I'm not going there yet though. I'm more just talking about having a profile.
That's kind of where I was going to say that I think AU patient summary itself is talking about how it might use document reference. And so I think I'm echoing that I've also seen in the project spaces a need for this kind of thing. Yeah.
So it's being proactive without specific requirements coming down. Yeah, personally, between the two, like the generating system device, I think we need a bit more thought around that one. I think the document reference has some universal value. I don't know if Landon or Marika or Marvin have got some comments on that or experience.
Say that once more, sorry.
Does it have a universal common pattern of structure?
No, just utility, like the desire to exchange document references like PDFs, letters, all sorts of use cases, in my opinion.
I think there are a lot of use cases. It's been a while since I've looked at the documents workflow that we've been working on. I think there will be some things that will be common, but I don't know if it is common because of internal workflows or common because of general industry requirement.
And Brett?
I think there's probably a good set of the metadata kind of elements we could look at must supports around, and that would be useful. But I think the big problem is the document, the type element and the binding, and what do we mean in terms of document types, which is, I think it's more that guidance will need some talk, because it's at the moment it's like preferred link code, and then nobody knows how to use them. So I think even having a set that we recognize for certain purposes would be good. You know, which is kind of just biting off a small part. Yeah, something like that.
Yes, although we
Yeah.
have to be careful that Core isn't prescribing what particular use cases do. So I think there's a fine line to walk there.
I agree. I think we'll get bogged down and not get anywhere if we go there. But just to say that,
Yeah.
you know, the type or the class or whatever must support, then I think that's a good step forward with the actual value sets. I think is a dog's breakfast.
Marvin?
I'd have to check and see what the Helix team are doing with that. I don't know if they're using document reference much. I suspect our next real use case for it will be in the aged care space. And that's more tied to patient summary than anything else.
All right. I think, well, certainly there's enough, I think, interest that we could see if there actually are common useful things to be done. So we could work through that.
I've just got another suggestion. Yeah, I know document type is a bit of a hand grenade. The maybe we could look at category, and because the problem is that if we let just document types of all kinds roll around, that it becomes basically pointless, because you
Well, that
start,
does
unless
sound
they're in context. Yeah, unless they're in the context of a
have
just in
enough to
the
contribute if we started discussion, which is really
just in
what
a
this is
generic
about.
sense. Yeah, if I have a whole bunch of these in a system, how in the hell am I going to find what I'm looking for if I don't have some terminology attached? Is my question. So, yeah.
So let's move on to another one quickly, because I think document reference is kind of that category of it wouldn't land in R2, but there's certainly, it's really bubbling up. It came close in the scoping workshop that I think that would come into R3, and so we could start work through it now. I think a similar thing to that is AUCDI last updated. There was enough work that we identified that might actually be a relatively big piece to do. And the question is, how relevant is to that people now? Do we start work on it now, or do we start work on it later? Can we even start working on it now, or do we need to wait for something like else? All right. A couple of other options. There was some interest in doing must support clarification on patient telecom. That was around December, but I've not heard anyone raise that. So I just want to double check before we close off R2, because I think that could land in R2. Is anyone looking for clarification on must supports? Like, which parts of the contact detail data type do you actually have to support, instead of leaving that from a requester's perspective to all of them, and for responders to have one or more, and we're not clear on which ones they are? I don't think that's causing anyone problems at the moment, but I wanted to double check on that.
Could you ask the question again, please?
Yeah, sorry about that. That was a bit vague.
I think we're talking about sub-elements of telecom.
We are.
Thoughts on sub-elements.
So if we look at AU per core patient, which if I find the right tab, so if we look at, for example, name, we've been clear on which parts of a name we expect support for, but we have not clarified that for contact point, and we haven't clarified it for address. So at the moment, there are all these different options. There was some interest when we were looking at this in December and also through R1 to eventually get to where we are clear on which of these is must support. And I wanted to check if that was that was actually wanted now, if this is causing anyone problems, or this is something that we will just keep on our back burner. Brett.
Yeah, I think that's a valuable thing just to explicitly state some must supports in here, just because at the moment, like, you can definitely share things around. Like, I can share around a use without any other data, which doesn't make a lot of sense, right? If, as an example, right? So I think if we had some must supports on like use, value, and system, that would make a lot of sense. So I think we should talk about that for sure.
So I'm a little
Has
bit
that
confused,
caused
Danielle.
anyone
Are we
problems?
talking about R2 or R3? Because you kind of, when I
I'm
talked
checking
about document
both.
reference,
There
you're
is,
suggesting it might be an R3 thing, but now you're talking about this.
I'm saying that we can start work on some things, some of which we could finish in R2, I think, likely, and some things I'm warning that if we pick them up, we won't be able to finish in R2. So that I guess I am running through the highest priority things out of, and I should have said that, I'm doing a check-in on the highest priority voted things out of our December scoping workshop before we close off the work in R2 to check in where do people want to focus their time on, and to see if any of these are, for example, if that's a pain point for someone, so we should actually get onto that, or if it's actually more useful, even though it's not your pain point, to be working through document reference because people need it, is my general kind of question. Where do we want to be spending our time? We can come back to this. I've posed this, but yeah. Brett?
I think the telecom discussion, and I think what I would say is that's actually a contact point data type profile, and we'd apply it across all telecom use. I think makes a lot of sense because it kind of sets some minimum expectations around the sharing of that stuff generally, which I think is not, and I don't think it's too complicated. So hopefully, I think that's a doable one.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't think it's overly complex to do, and most systems have that kind of capability in there, and it would be pretty easy to check and see what's there and what's not there.
Yeah, we do have the evidence from the vendor support. We know we've got some good evidence on what people have built in, and people could go away and check it. So is there interest? Next meeting, we put up a proposal for must support for clarifying the patient telecom must supports, or just a proposal around this? And if so, who would like to prepare one for our next meeting?
It's not going to be Brett.
Unlikely.
Does anyone want to put forward a proposal? I'm happy to help and work with you on that. I can also have a crack at it myself if you want. There's been enough interest to indicate.
Would you do a contact point profile and
No.
apply it?
No, because there's nothing to, unless we would have to have the discussion, and there's reasons we haven't done it the same way everywhere.
Okay.
I wouldn't yet.
Yeah, that's fine. I think, maybe work through the other resource types when they get there. Cool.
I mean, if I was doing it, I wouldn't. Someone else might if they work on the proposal.
Yeah, it's a bigger proposal then because we have to look at all the different cases, right? Yeah.
All right, so I will find someone and we'll see if we can put that on the agenda for next meeting. There's been enough interest in it. I've had a couple of other suggestions from people that they would like us to undertake. And I might bring them up at our next meeting then. There's one on guidance. I've had a few people come to me throughout this year through connectathons and otherwise around things that would be really helpful if we thought about including in AU Core. And I'd like us to start considering that as well as we look to close up AU Core R2. So with that being said, what's next? Aha.
Can I just ask a
got...
question, Danielle, before you go?
Yes.
If a proposal came forward for a document reference, would that be considered?
Yes, we would consider it. I think it's a vanishingly small possibility that it would get approved. Well, even if we approved it, we've got to get to AFMM2 or AFMM1 to ballot it, which is why I was thinking that we start work on it. It might be in draft in AU Core, but it wouldn't actually be officially published. So I think proposals for new profiles, those in high priority, like document reference, are good. And we could include them at least in draft stage and then see what it takes us to get to AFMM1 and AFMM2.
And that's because we have to go through a testing process and get it through
We do.
systems and all that kind of stuff. And what what I heard from the other vendors was that there was perhaps not a lot of implementation of it yet. Is that what I heard, Marvin and Marika, etc.?
I would. Okay. No. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right.
Plans, but limited implementation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think it's more the issue, Heath, that of Brett's concerns, that there are a number of different things that would involve long, meaningful discussion about where we want to land, whether or not we do work through terminology or other things. I think coming to a baseline set of must supports and obligations is probably easy, but then like how do we expose it through search, and what do we do with terminology or identifiers in particular to put it to a good mature state that we would want people to use it for, is something that I think would take longer than just the few weeks we've got left, is where I was thinking.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So we've gone through the next meeting. This is about where we're up to. We've got a number of things to talk through next call. I'll add in patient telecom into this list. And all right, unless there are any other comments or questions, we're at time, and I'll see you folks in a fortnight.
Thanks, Jay. Great work.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.